Have you ever dreamed of being a CEO, but, the whole startup grind just doesn't feel like you? Well, it turns out there's another way to get to the top. It's this really cool mix of entrepreneurship and private equity. Let's get into it.
Right, so when you think of a founder, you probably picture someone sleeping under their desk, constantly chasing venture capital, and just praying their brand new idea actually takes off. But what if you could just skip all that and go straight to running a business that's already established and profitable?
Turns out there's a path for that. It's called entrepreneurship through acquisition. And the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. Instead of building a company from scratch, you find a really solid existing business and you take over, ready to make it grow.
Now, to really see how this all works, we're going to follow the story of a guy named Gabriel Rodasha. For him, finding this model wasn't just some career change. No, it was the answer he'd been looking for his entire professional life.
So let's set the scene. Picture Gabriel. He's an engineer by training, he's in an MBA class, and he's got that entrepreneurial itch. But he just can't see himself doing the whole startup thing. And then one day, a professor starts describing this model, and for Gabriel, everything just clicked.
I mean, this was his eureka moment. He said it was exactly the career path he had been looking for 10 years ago. It was the perfect match for his ambition to lead and grow a company, but without having to start from absolute zero. This one discovery really set him on a brand new path.
So what is this model that sparked his big moment? It's called a search fund. Let's break down how this thing actually works, because it's pretty fascinating.
Okay, so a search fund is basically this unique partnership between an aspiring CEO, they call him the searcher, and a group of investors. But here's the key difference. The investors aren't betting on a business idea. No, they're betting on the person. They're betting on their ability to find a good company, buy it, and then lead it to success.
And this model is totally different from what you might already know. In, say, private equity, they usually bring in some hired gun to run the company. But here, the searcher is the future CEO. And unlike venture capital, which is all about chasing those high-risk, high-growth startups, the whole point here is to find one stable, proven business. For investors, this is super attractive because it lets them get into a market of solid businesses that are usually too small for big PE funds, but with a super motivated leader running the show.
And because investors are really betting on the person, they want to make the business itself as safe a bet as possible. They're looking for something predictable, sturdy, kind of boring in a good way. There's even a little joke in the industry that the company needs to be solid enough to survive an inexperienced CEO. Because, hey, for a lot of these searchers, this is their first time in the big chair.
Okay, so once the searcher gets that investor backing, the hunt is on. And listen, this isn't a sprint, it's a full-on marathon that can take years.
The whole process is like a giant funnel. It starts with raising money just to pay for the search itself. Then the searcher builds this massive pipeline of companies, a lot of the time by just cold calling successful businesses that aren't even on the market. From there, it's all about systematically narrowing thousands of options down to just one.
And just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about, Gabriel screened 1,500 companies to find the one he eventually bought. In the US, it's not crazy for a searcher to look at tens of thousands of businesses. It just shows you the insane level of persistence this path demands.
So after all that screening, you'd think the final decision would just come down to the numbers on a spreadsheet, right? But a lot of the time, the thing that actually seals the deal is, well, it's much more human. It's all about building a real, genuine connection.
And that brings up a really important question. Why on earth would the owner of a successful, profitable company who isn't desperate for cash agree to sell? Why would they hand over the keys to their life's work?
Well, the answer usually has a lot less to do with money and a lot more to do with legacy. You see, many of these founders are getting close to retirement, and they don't have a successor lined up. What they're really looking for is someone who will respect the company culture and continue what they started.
And this is where the searcher has a totally unique advantage. A big corporate buyer might come in and talk about synergies and cost cutting. A searcher sits across the table and says something completely different. They say, I want to be your successor. I want to dedicate the next decade of my life to growing this company. It's a deeply personal pitch, and it makes all the difference.
So, the deal is finally signed. The hunt is over. But really, the true journey is just beginning. Now the searcher has to make the biggest transition of them all, from being a searcher to being a CEO. And that is the real test. It's one thing to find and buy a company. It's a whole other ballgame to actually run it, earn the trust of the employees, and shift your entire mindset from being a deal guy to a day-to-day operator.
See, this isn't just a transaction. It's a long-term career.
After that multi-year search, the searcher steps in to run the company for the next 5, 7, maybe even 10+ years. We're talking about a massive commitment.
And their incentives are set up to reflect that long-term commitment. Yeah, the searcher gets a salary, but the real prize is equity, a big chunk of it, often around 20 to 25% of the company. Some of it vests over time, and another part vests based on the returns they generate for investors. It creates this incredibly powerful alignment where everyone wins when the company does well.
So what can we take away from this whole journey? First, this is a marathon, not a sprint. You're signing up for a decade, maybe more. Second, success really comes down to a rare mix of skills. You need the finance brain to make the deal, but you also need the soft skills to win over a founder. And finally, the best searchers treat their investors not just as a source of cash, but as a board of mentors.
You know, as the old corporate ladder gets a little shaky and the startup world proves to be incredibly tough, this idea of entrepreneurship through acquisition offers a really compelling third option. It's a path that takes an incredible amount of grit, for sure, but for the right person, it could be the ultimate career move. So the question is, could this model actually reshape how we think about entrepreneurship?